Hi and welcome to Thete Gaming and another little preview of the new edition of Age of Sigmar. In this video I'm going to actually start off discussing the better than expected pre-order day, but mostly the huge shake-up in points that I've got queries about, as well as the new reinforcement rules that's going to massively shake up army design. But the pre-orders first. It was good news. Even as I'm doing this video, which is on Monday morning, it's still possible to buy Dominion. Still possible to pre-order it. Now, a few of the related items are out of stock, including the combat gauge, which wasn't actually flagged as limited edition, but I sort of suspected it was, given that it also was for the last edition. But you can get something that does the same job elsewhere, so that's no big deal. The important thing for me was that anyone who was anticipating the game, wanted the game set, but, I said at the time, maybe you were working when the pre-orders went live and you wouldn't be able to get yourself a copy, therefore, well, you could, because it didn't sell out. Essentially, the queuing system that they used, I suppose, wasn't really needed. It was still a good thing to use because there will have been a lot of people on the site. I was on the site 2 hours before, but the important thing is I was on the site when they put the queue up. So I would have been in the first lot and it still took me half an hour to get onto the site. Well, I say half an hour, 50 minutes really, but half an hour after the thing went live. So absolutely it would have stopped the website melting. But like I said last week, if people had confidence that they could order over a range of days, there would be no need to be on the second the pre-orders were added to the site. But it's all good in the end. I'm not sure why. Did they make more copies this time? If we compare it to not even just Indomitus, but like Curse City, but especially we're going to compare it to Indomitus. Did they make more copies? Is it just because Age of Sigmar isn't as popular as 40k, which it isn't? Where obviously the latest edition of that sold out in minutes, or was it also partly down to not allowing people to buy 3 copies of it? Don't know. All good though, because no one had to miss out. But the main thing I want to talk about are the points changes, I suppose, because when there were first rumours of 3rd edition coming out earlier this year, I did a video where I went over some things that I did and didn't want to see in the game. Didn't want to see the double turn. What did we get? We got the double turn with an incentive for going second as well. Never mind, I'm over it. I'm not over it, but I will get over it. But anyway, as part of that, I looked at 9th edition 40k and thought, well, there are some changes in here. I wonder if they'll do some of the same changes in Age of Sigmar. And they did. So we've had the coherency rules updated to be like those in 40k. That's a good thing. I'm in favour of that. And we've also had the battlefield size reduced. And it's been reduced to the same as it is in 40k. It was the same before, and now it's the same again. Now, the rationale in 40k for doing this, as I understood it, was in 8th edition, you weren't being squeezed too much on choice of units. That's how it was explained to me. I don't know whether that explanation came directly from Games Workshop or I can't remember now. But the idea was you could take things to cover all bases. You could take your anti-tank, you could take your objective secured stuff, you could take some psychic, you could take anything you needed. If your army had them available, which not all armies did. So the roster design wasn't as laden with compromise as it could be. The idea was make it so that you really have to think about compromise so that your army has particular strengths and you can't actually cover all bases, in theory. Now, I also noted that it works in 40k because 40k isn't really always about the big battles. In the narrative, in the lore, it has big battles, of course. It's not really always about that. Small skirmishes at times, or small battalions, forces taking over a town, something like that. All of this sort of thing fits perfectly well. So you can almost make the game the size that you want. So reducing the number of models on the table didn't feel wrong in 40k narratively. In Age of Sigmar, I didn't quite have the same feeling, and that may just be a perception. But, we've got the same battlefield size reduction, which suggested to me as soon as I heard that, that potentially the real reason, because that didn't exist in Age of Sigmar. It wasn't the case with 2nd edition that, there's no real choice of army design. You're just going to take a bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other. There was always choice. There was always compromises needed to be made. So that makes me think maybe the real reason is more about, maybe they're thinking about the space people have to play at home. You know, maybe that's part of it. Because I don't see the reason otherwise for Age of Sigmar. But then I thought, so is that going to mean a corresponding points increase for armies because you've got a smaller amount of space to reduce the size of the army so you're not too crowded, meaning we're going to be fielding smaller forces? I mean, in a word, yes, but it's a bit weird. Because in 40k, it was said by experienced players that the new 2,000 points would be like the old 1750, roughly, give or take. In Age of Sigmar, it's way more varied. See, some armies have had huge points increases, some minor points increases. Now, they've all been increases. If I look at all of the 2,000 points lists I've worked on over the past half year, all of them would now cost more than 2,000 points, every single one. And that's across a whole range of armies. Now, in theory, this can make sense that you would have this disparity, because 3rd edition, it blew me away just how different it is. Even though we'd seen a few things prefaced, just how many new rules that completely changed the way you'd play the game. Very, very different to 2nd edition. Naturally, when you do something like that, some armies are going to be weaker and some are going to be stronger with those changes. Where I have a slight concern is not that some armies have had a massive increase. Like, give you an example. I'll talk about this in a minute as well. But as a quick example, the battle report we had on the channel at the weekend, Disciples of Tzeentch against Daughters of Cain. Both of those are strong armies in general terms. I'm not saying they're necessarily the armies we picked, but the armies are strong, tournament-wise and all the rest of it. And yet, the Daughters of Cain has become much more expensive than, say, the Disciples of Tzeentch. And you can say to yourself, well, again, it's not a points adjustment that we would normally have had it this year. This is specifically for 3rd edition. And if Daughters of Cain benefit more from 3rd edition than Disciples of Tzeentch, like Disciples of Tzeentch, let's be honest. I was going to say, actually, because they've got so many more wizards, the reds are going to be blowing up all over the place. But actually, Tzeentch of all armies has, aside from Teclis, I suppose, has some defense against that. They can sort of defend themselves against the heads blowing up thing. But where I do have a little concern is there are so many points adjustments. It's like almost universal. Almost every unit has had some points adjustment. I'm not convinced it was possible to spend enough time getting it quite right. Because what's happening is you're adjusting the points for a completely new game system. And bear in mind, this is a company that doesn't proofread its own rules books before sending them off to print. And if they try and tell me that they do, then they need to get either better proofreaders or give them more time. Because what's missed at the editing stage is shocking. It's stuff that would never get through if anyone actually proofread it properly. So it's hard for me to believe that such a company will have cracked such a complex readjustment of points. So I think it's fair to say that we'll maybe have a bumpy year where some armies do really well and some fall by the wayside before another major readjustment in 2022 that may be more in line with sensible reality. For example, if we look at the AOS game I published on the channel last week again, again, the Tzeentch army, I mean, they'd both be over 2,000 points. That would be over. But in Tzeentch, some things even went down. The Vortex Beast went down significantly and some things went up. But, you know, the overall thing was that army would come out now a bit over 2,000 points. My Daughters of Cain army was, which was 1990 points then. I've forgotten exactly what it's like, 2,400 and something. So they had a huge points increase. Again, obviously they're expected to be beneficiaries of the new rules in a strong way. But it does make a bit more sense now that I think about it with some of the Soulblight Gravelord stuff. Because I did think, reading through the book, I thought Manfred and Neferata are a bit pricey here. But perhaps not so much. First of all, alongside the new 3rd edition points values, where all armies have had a bit of an increase. But also, just in terms of the new rules. Like, for example, they're both monsters. So they'll get the monster ability at the end of the charge phase. So there's a few, benefits to them now that maybe you think, well, maybe they're not actually all that pricey. But the changes there compared to the Battle Tome, which came out anyway, obviously, that was the Battle Tome that came out just before 3rd edition. Games Workshop said it was fully 3rd edition compliant. The only adjustments were really a very minor points reduction for Nagash. Everything else is the same. And that was such a minor points reduction, you wonder if there was any point. But like then you've got other armies like Nighthorn. Now, they only received a very small points increase. But, one, they weren't a top army in 2nd edition, has to be said. They weren't top draw. And it could also be argued they're a little bit buggered by the new rules as well. For example, now, I was going to do a video on spells and priestery, which I still intend to. But the new core spells, superb. They've improved them no end. Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield have both been made better. But the new Mystic Shield spell can't be used by Nighthorn at all now. It's not just that it's not as good as it was. The old Mystic Shield was pretty good for Nighthorn. Better than it is for other armies. Now it's not just that it's now not as good. They actually can't use it. They cannot usefully use it. It doesn't work on them. Because what the new Mystic Shield does now is add +1 to your saves. But Nighthorns are not allowed any modifiers to their save. And it does specifically say positive or negative. So they can't use it. So especially alongside the fact that they are now the only army without sub-factions, I would think that means they are going to be screaming out to be certainly an army that gets a new battle tome before the end of the year. And quite frankly, although you would anticipate, of course, probably the next battle tome would be the Cruel Boys, because that would make no sense for it not to be the case. Really, surely Nighthorn should be after that. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But yeah, so I'd made quite a few 2,000 points lists for armies that I either have or will be getting this year, you know, in preparation for battle reports and stuff like that. Obviously, they'd have to be reworked. I knew they'd have to be touched up anyway, even without the news of 3rd edition, because you get a points adjustment summer anyway. That just happens with the General's Handbook. But they're all now going to have to be adjusted to include quite a few smaller armies now. Another thing that's going to shake up armies, as well as the points costs, is the new way of approaching unit sizes. And this again is where some armies will be fine with it, but some will be severely weakened. So instead of just having a minimum and maximum unit size, you have your unit size, and in most cases you can reinforce them once, or if they're battle line, twice. I'm talking about match play here. Not that I've seen all the rules for match play, just snippets, but the idea is it's like you can get this from the core rules, you can reinforce them. So it's not a case of saying it costs. I mean, it used to be in 2nd edition, it would cost you so much for each 10 or 5 or whatever the size was. And then maybe for a maximum size unit, you'd get a bit of a discount. Well, the discount is obviously gone now. But yeah, so Plague Monks, for example, which come in blocks of 10. So with 3rd edition, if you have a Clan's Pestilence army, they're battle line. If you don't, then they're not battle line, and you can only take 20 of them. But let's say you're taking a Clan's Pestilence army, so you can take them in a maximum size unit of 30, not 40. Now, this is important because, first of all, in a Clan's Pestilence army, you're going to have at least 2 units. Let's be realistic. You are going to have at least 2 units of them. You may have 3. You will have at least 2. They're your battle line choice. Now, this system actually makes a unit like this much weaker. So much so that I might almost have thought they should have got a points reduction. Of course, there are other factors as well. The thing is that there are units in the game that get some bonus if they're above a certain number. Now, Plague Monks in a Skaven tide list, which includes, of course, a Clan's Pestilence list, are no different. They do get a bonus if there's like at least 20 in the unit, I think. But the important thing is they get a bonus if there's at least 30 as well. So to be maximum strength, you need at least 30. So when you could field 40 of them, and now that I think about this, I've commissioned some of these, and I've got commissioned now way more than I could reasonably use in an army now. Never mind. Oh no. Never mind. But the point is, when you could field them in units of 40, you could afford to lose quite a few of them and still maintain that bonus. Not now. You've got 30 of them. You need 30 to get that extra +1 to win. All your opponent has to do is kill one and you've substantially weakened the unit. And that throws balance right out, because it's a bit like saying, if I can deliver this into, and it doesn't have ranged attacks, it's only close combat. If I can deliver this into close combat with all 30, they get +1 to win. That's huge. Given the sheer number of attacks a unit like this has, that's huge, absolutely massive. Whereas if my opponent kills just one, it plinks one off, it doesn't get that +1 to win. The difference in strength of that unit is huge, to the point where you cannot really balance it properly. So units like this are going to need addressing quite urgently in the early stage of 3rd edition, I would think. Not necessarily saying, oh, well, any armies that have a unit like this need a new battle token, because there's so many armies will have a unit like that. But I think it's certainly going to need updated war scrolls in some way. I'm not saying I'm expressing confidence they will, but I don't think it's really a good idea to have a bonus for having the maximum unit size. I don't think it's ever a good idea to do that. And I guess the same could be said of, like, I think in terms of Doomfire Warlocks in a different way, because they're not battle line. They do get bonus. They get a bonus for having 5, but they also get, which is the minimum size anyway. But they also get a bonus for having 10. But you can't take more than 10 now, because they're never battle line. So there are issues like that. I think things like that are going to need addressing. Yeah, I think there's some war scrolls that need updating. And I'm not sure, because there isn't normally a way of doing that other than with, like, the Broken Realms books. But given that the war scrolls are themselves free on the website anyway, I just think maybe, mind you, the issue with the Plague Monks is not so much their war scroll, it's actually the army allegiance abilities. Tricky. But anyway, those are my thoughts. It is going to shake up army design quite a lot. It's going to weaken some armies substantially. It's going to strengthen some armies. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.